There's an old saying, it's often credited as an African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And perhaps less poetic, but something we've all heard is, if it's not what you know, it's who you know. And both of those, I think, are never more true than they are today. But not for the reasons you're thinking. Sure, it's great to have friends in high places, but I'm talking about the power of relationships, the power of connections, the power of community. Welcome to another episode of Let's Go. We're taking the lessons we learned in 2020 and we're applying them and helping entrepreneurs build kick-ass companies in 2021 and beyond. As we like to say, there's no excuses. We've got to find a way. So let's go. We've just wrapped our series on traction and EOS and all how entrepreneurs can help build their own companies with that. Now we're shifting gears and we are talking about the importance of building connections and long-lasting relationships. And I can think of no better person to talk to than somebody in the Conscious Capitalism community. Joining me today is Karen Sammon. Karen is an uber successful CEO. Most recently, she led a turnaround at PAR Technologies, which is a New York Stock Exchange company. She also has a new venture called Next 7 Gens. She's on several boards, including Conscious Capitalism, which is where we want to spend the bulk of our time today. Karen is also a graduate of Colgate. She has a JD from the University of Cincinnati, and she's a graduate from the Stegan Integral Leadership Program. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's really good to be here. Thanks for having me. I am looking as much forward to talking about conscious capitalism. I wish that I was able to, so I live literally 30 miles south of or north of Colgate. And I went to school there because not only because it's a great institution, but at the time I was looking at colleges, it was 1982. My father was taking PAR Technology public. And so my parents were off doing the whirlwind tour, talking about the company. And that left me at home watching my siblings and, finding, places to go to college. I found the picture book on the floor of the guidance counselor's office. I'm like, this looks like a good place. Maybe I'll go there. So they wanted me to go to tech schools. They wanted me to go to Catholic schools. And I went to Colgate University.
It's a great school. I want to dive into conscious capitalism and what you did to transform Partech, but I want to talk about two things to start, and that's the reason we're here today on March 16th. About a month ago, we tried to tape this episode, and the city of Austin was going through a once-in-a-generation ice storm, and then we tried to retape it about 2 weeks ago, and your house had COVID, among other things, in your household. So let's talk about that for a minute, and I want to talk about why it's relevant.
Wow, that is a big question, but we've gone through so much in the last year, but even in the last several months. So the way that COVID has impacted all the businesses, individuals, everybody in some way, in a way, shape, or form, has really shaped, I think how we're going to come out of it. And then followed by Black Lives Matter and social unrest, the attack on the Capitol, the storms, the unprecedented storms that that we see everywhere, including the ice storm in Texas, which I'm glad that you all are starting to. Most of you have recovered from, and others are recovering from. It's been a very unique time to live through that will have far-reaching impact, and it can be really positive. I think as we internalize all that we've witnessed and how it will show up again in us as leaders and how we work with our people and in a new environment. I don't want to go back to the way we were. I don't know about you, but it was good, and I thought I was having fun, but this reset has really reshaped me. What about you?
I think that's a great segue into what I want to talk about today, and the fact that we were both very understanding of each other. We had empathy, which maybe before COVID we might not have had. We might have just been frustrated because we weren't able to get it done, and we were able to communicate. We have trust and respect about it as well. And I think those are keys as we look in expanding and helping us build our relationships in our network. Empathy and understanding is a big attribute.
Yeah, most definitely. When you think about building business, it's all about building trust, safety, relationships, communication. I always think about values first, and when you find shared values with people that you want to do business with suppliers, that really shapes the way you move forward, and that really is based on a foundation of trust. And you're right. Even with us as we navigated those challenging days of trying to connect, it was being clear clear, being empathetic, exposing and being vulnerable to what was really going on, that then, generates that kind of compassion that then supports a real good, solid connection. So you can have a great conversation and then generate greatness from people in general.
You touched on something that you mentioned. I don't know if you said this exactly, but what I heard was authenticity. And as I look to geek out on conscious capitalism and how it can be a change agent for, making the world a better place, I think about those authentic relationships and how if we're authentic with people, we just a much deeper connection than there would be if we were just to bullshit each other and say, you know what, today's not a good day, or whatever the case may be. So I'd like to dive into, if you will, conscious capitalism and how what you guys are doing to make an impact in the world.
Yeah, so conscious capitalism is, I think, at a really unique juncture. The movement's been generating momentum for 12, 14 years. And with COVID, I think it really demonstrated the opportunity to identify with what people need, leaders, how leaders want to how leaders have to navigate challenges and then get the most of their people. And it's not only, save our business or our business is accelerating but it's like, what do our people need? All of a sudden, everybody was displaced. And leaders had to internalize first to say, what do our employees need in order to be safe, to make sure that they're protected, then they have the tools to work, and then they feel connected. So as conscious capitalism, really looked at the environment, we're able to see like, hey, this is a time where we can use our philosophy of having a higher purpose as an organization, elevate humanity through business, working with leaders to allow them to be conscious themselves first, and then bring that forth to the organization to build a conscious culture where people feel, like you said, trusted, feel safe, feel empowered, feel like they can be intentional, and then to think about the whole ecosystem. And it's not like one piece after the other. It's all these pieces, and the ecosystem needs to be healthy in order for the business to be able to grow and accelerate and really to outperform competition.
Let's talk about that ecosystem for a second, Karen, because that's what I think is so valuable that most people don't recognize about conscious capitalism. In the old way, the shareholder value is everything that we were trying to create for enterprises. That was the old mentality, and it kind of still is the mentality for many businesses. But what conscious capitalism talks about is the entire, as you said, ecosystem, what conscious capitalism calls the stakeholder map. Would you mind talking about that a little bit and giving me your perspective on that?
I think you can kind of look at it in a few different ways. From my experience, kind of just like going back a little bit in time, as you mentioned, I was doing a turnaround of a 50-year-old public company, and the company had grown into providing hardware for restaurants, retail, hospitality. The products that we made were being commoditized. Our customers were being disrupted. Our competition was being disrupted, and we needed to both do a turnaround of the company to get it back on the rails, and then look to do a transformation. And as we were going through the motions of establishing the strategy, divesting assets, we were also looking at how would we be able to really execute on the strategy of transformation. And the way we settled on it was kind of the two really important pieces. One was that the people were going to be responsible. Our organization of 1,000 employees needed to pull us through the transformation. So we needed to go from a company that was really had a culture of fear, and it was almost toxic what I had walked into, to one that was going to migrate to one that was one of trust and safety. And equally as important, we needed our ecosystem. So our employees, our ecosystem consisted of our employees, our customers, our suppliers, our shareholders, of course, as a public company, the communities that we resided in, because we were a global company. But when I looked at it, we needed all of our ecosystem to be on the same, rowing in the same direction to help us, migrate through providing hardware as a $250 million company to a software company. And it was a major shift, not only in the products that we were selling, but our infrastructure, the compensation and the benefits for our employees, what our customers were buying from us, how they were buying from us, what our suppliers were selling to us and supplying to us, and how that relationship was going to change. And then equally as important, how we would be relating with with the communities in which we operated, because that too is going to shift. So that
Holy
was
smokes, that's amazing how many challenges you're faced with. So how did you do it?
Kurt, we shouldn't have been able to do it. So most turnarounds and most transformations don't work. 20 to 25% of transformations work. And the more challenging, the older the company, the lower the percentage gets. So in reality, we should not have been successful. When you look at the numbers, the company was doing $250 million in revenue. We had a valuation of $63 million. So we are completely undervalued. By the time I was leading, and today, if you look at the company today, building on the same strategy, the company is valued at almost $2 billion. So we were able to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I credit Conscious Capitalism, the philosophy of Conscious Capitalism, as the foundation that helped us navigate the really rough waters, because it was incredibly challenging. And it was, again, those two pieces. It was putting the culture, focusing on the culture. So you think about it, values first, always values first, and digging deep into what is going to guide us through the tough decisions. So values first, closing the gap between the walk and the talk, making sure there's no light in the, with what we were doing with those values, and then getting the right people. And that meant getting the transitioning the leadership team. You mentioned Stegan. We all went through ILP. We got common language. We really thought about focus and intention, bringing conflict to the table. And then the really critical piece was our ecosystem, was ensuring that all the stakeholders really understood where we were going. So it was a public company. We really needed our shareholders to understand where we were going and believe in the transformation that was possible.
Wow. You just mentioned a couple of things that I think boggle most people's minds, right? When you think of transformation, I can see now why only 25% succeed, because when I think of transformation or turnarounds, as most people say, we're talking about shedding costs, getting rid of people, shutting down divisions and all the things that come with cost. And what you just described, and maybe you took those steps anyway, but you started with culture, core values, and people. So help me reconcile that and tell me why that helped you be successful. Maybe give us a couple of tips so that our audience can lead their own transformation.
So I did start with cutting costs. And I have to admit that I spent the first, or even, I don't know if this is even an admission, it's just the way it happened. I spent the first half of my career focused on business metrics, predominantly financial metrics, and making sure that the company was operating at the highest financial performance. That is what I learned in school. That is what I was taught by the people that I worked for. In the institutions that I attended, and that's how I led my teams, and we were incredibly metric driven. As I kind of entered around the probably about 2008, 2009, I was very unsatisfied, and going to work to make sure the company was profitable it just wasn't what I wanted to do, in the way it wasn't like who I wanted to be. And it was at that time that I started to shift, and I started to think more about what really drove me was serving others. And so as I started to shift to what would drive me in business, because I really love business and creating strong businesses and successful businesses. But what really made me feel good was when other people started to succeed, and where I could promote other people and I could understand what really got them excited about coming to work. And that's when I started to really understand there was way more to business. And that's when the shift began. So when I had the opportunity to step into the role of president at PAR Technology and then to CEO, I was already on that path. And I was really understanding the power of the team, the power of performance when teams were incredibly motivated by something more than just delivering to the bottom line. And that is why we started to focus on values first. Because PAR at the time had gone through CEO shifts, a number of them, and there wasn't any kind of understanding of what we valued. So starting with values was fundamental. We needed to know what was going going to guide us as we went forward. And so we interviewed all 1,000 employees to see what they thought the values were. PAR is a 50-year-old company, and I would say probably at that time, 50% of our employees had been with the company for more than 12 years. So I had deep insight into what was the DNA of the company. I didn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That would have been, too like plate tectonics and too much of a shift for everybody. But when I focused on them and allowing them to tell us what we valued, we were able to extract that really important DNA. And then we were able to drive to what is our purpose? What is our higher purpose? Why are we here? And it wasn't to build great software. That was what we did. That was what we did. It wasn't to bring on more restaurant clients and that are multi-units, and that was important too. But our why became our ability to recognize and unleash possibilities and to do it for good. And that started to become more exciting for everyone.
Man, you uncovered the purpose for the organization, which helped a lot of people get behind that and really build on. You mentioned a couple of things there, Karen, that I think are important for a lot of our audience. Part of it was around your own journey to your purpose and how what drove you, and and the fact that it wasn't all about metrics and the bottom line, which I think a lot of our audience can relate to. That they're mid-career and they're like, man, what the hell am I doing? All I'm doing is focused on the bottom line, and I want to do something more and it's more impactful. And so the way I usually lead those discussions when I'm dealing with an executive in transition is, hey, this is a gift. Let's talk about what drives you, fuels you. Where is that intersection of perhaps an economic engine with your calling, if you will? So not to get too deep and introspective, but I think it's a way for us as leaders to be thinking about life and our businesses. We can do more than just think about making money.
Yeah, and I think that that's so apropos, because you asked the question about authenticity, and in that prior me, I wasn't me. I was this what I thought I should be. And my nickname growing up was Faucets, because I was really emotive and things would really impact me. And I turned off my ability to cry for about a very long time, and never cried in my professional life. When I returned to PAR to lead us through the transformation, I showed up and I showed up and through a lot of support. We started the conversation about conscious capitalism. As I was talking to a mentor and a strategist, Fred LeFranc, who was working with me. He was a consultant, and he is a consultant in the restaurant industry. He introduced me to Conscious Capitalism in 2013 or 2014, and really encouraged me to go to my first CEO summit. When I went to the summit, all of a sudden I saw leaders who were willing to be open and vulnerable and authentic, and talk about what's really hard and ask for help, and not this image of what the leader should be. And it helped me recognize that, you need to show up as you in order to be really effective. It's like Gandhi being a leader versus Winston Churchill being a leader. If one had traded robes for cigars, it wouldn't have worked. It's that kind of a thought process. I recognized that I could show up as me, and I really embraced that. And that also really helped us to move the company in ways that it might not have done so otherwise.
And that's beautiful, Karen. If you walk away from this with nothing else, be licensed to be you, be who you are. And with all the flaws and warts and whatever that come with that, I admit my mistakes most of the time and not all the time. And the fact that I can say that I don't do it all the time, maybe makes it more authentic, right? Sometimes I do. But
yeah, I remember that you interviewed Rand Stagen recently, and Rand, you mentioned that I went through the Stagen Academy and through ILP. I'm still in part of the community, but I stayed in the leadership programs for 4 years. So I went from ILP to what they call advanced ILP or Dragon's Gap. Rand says frequently, leaders get the organizations they deserve. And you think about that just when it lands, good or bad. Why am I getting this organization? Why do I have people who are either on board or not? And it is that willingness to then go deeper into how do I address conflict? How do I really communicate and understand how other people are relating to me and to where we want to go together, and you can continue to unfold it. But it is if you can't, if you need to start with who you are and being comfortable in your own skin.
I love it. It's beautiful stuff, Karen. Hey, let's shift gears only slightly, because I want to continue this conversation, but let's talk about your next venture, which is very related to this. It's Next 7 Gens. Can you give us a minute on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So through my experience at PAR, and also through for where I live in central New York, which is very rural. It's a lot of your listeners may relate with it to being Rust Belt. There are a lot of companies like PAR. Many are founder-led, founders who don't have exit strategies, who deeply care about their people, they care about their legacy. As I think about where I live and our economy, oftentimes good businesses are picked up by private equity and moved out. And it hurts. It hurts the communities around us, and then the ripple effect to the families and schools and everybody else. So the objective of Next 7 Gens, the name comes from the Haudenosaunee principle of looking through the lens of 7 generations for every critical decision that is made that impacts a community. This was the Iroquois Nation, and I love that. Another Rand Stagen philosophy is being a leader that's looking to play for the long game. And the long game could be 20 years, 50 years. Rand really likes to push that vision. And so looking at it through that lens, we are acquiring businesses predominantly in the Rust Belt regions that have attributes to make the transformation to from what they've been to something greater, similarly to what I did at PAR. These are companies that are largely manufacturers, they're trade jobs. I like to explain that I am not that worried about college educated MBAs, software developers. They will do fine, and we need them. What I think is really important is that we focus on trade jobs and being able to upskill people to be able to be competitive in this 21st century. So that's our focus. And we just concluded our first acquisition, and it's in tech services.
Nice. Karen, that speaks so much about you. It also speaks to this concept of conscious capitalism. And let me just point out something to the audience that I think we're making clear. You can do good things and make money. So don't be fooled. You don't have to be to rape and pillage to make money, be a capitalist pig. I like to say I want to marry up the money making money mongering whore, so to speak, on the capitalist pig side, and I'm going to make money with the tree hugging left. I want to make the world a better place, and all is sunshine and rainbows. We can marry that up and make the world a better place using capitalism for good. So thank you for sharing your own journey.
I used to think about conscious capitalism. I remember the first time I heard the term, I'm like, that's an oxymoron. And then I could feel that, like, the dynamic tension between the words. I'm like, no, you can do this. And it's entirely possible. And here are these many examples of great companies who definitely have been able to consider you have to make profits. So it's not a choice between purpose and profit. It is a yes and. And so looking at what you're doing as a force for good, as elevating humanity through business, there's an absolute path forward, and it is the better path. It can help you to outperform your competition. It keeps you thinking about which partners are best for you, and also who don't I want to do business with, and who's misaligned. Helps you with hiring better and bringing in not groupthink, but people that can reinforce the values of the company, and then continue to have the positive flywheel momentum to build the company. You start to get other forces in, and that will slow down the momentum of the company.
Preach it, sister. I love it. And hey, by the way, thank you for fitting hiring better into your deal there.
Absolutely. It is that, I'm curious as to how you came up with the name of your company. Was it influenced by, these conscious capitalism principles?
It's a great question. I cannot take credit for it. I bought the company 10 years ago. It was already called Higher Better. But as the story goes, the founder was at some sort of workshop, maybe a Vern Harnish seminar or something. And they said, hey, we need to try to distill what you do into a few words. And at the end of this whole workshop, he came back with, we help people hire better. And so the name came out and it stuck. And we love the name. We actually have a trademark on the name. So if Google or anybody else tried to say, hey, we help you hire better, I can sue them until the end of the earth.
Yeah, well, I can't emphasize enough the importance of being able to hire better, hire best. People are everything. So every time I hear the terms human capital, human resources, I cringe because we're talking about people. People is people, not people as assets. And the better you hire, the better you will perform. And I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but especially now, we talked a little bit about like, hey, we're coming out of COVID and what's going to happen. Every indication is that we're going to continue to work in this hybrid environment. And so where we're going to have some digital and some in person, but it's going, so we need to really be intentional about how we focus on connection, how we focus on, creating teams using different methods. And then how we think about, you mentioned safety and trust a couple times. How are we thinking about the safety, the health and well-being of our employees? Because there's a lot of anxiety, depression, loneliness as a result of COVID. And as employers, we have our employees. This is not something that that I came up with, but I recognized through Bob Chapman and Barry Waymiller. Not like 1 hour a week, like in church. We have our employees for at least 40 hours a week. If you think about the impact that we can have on people over 40 hours a week, you spend more time at work than often you do at home. We have an obligation to be better, to do more.
I love it. Karen, man, thank you so much for joining me. I really love what you're doing both with your business, your current business, your past business, what you're doing with Conscious Capitalism. I think you're making a positive impact, and I encourage you to keep up the great work. For those of you out there listening, we're going to be back next time. We're going to keep the Let's Go series going with another episode around Conscious Capitalism. We're going to have Carrie Freeman Parsons come on, who is one of the longtime board members for Conscious Capitalism, is definitely a thought leader in this space. We hope that the seeds that we're planting today can help you make your business more conscious and really make your business a stronger business as we look to grow and expand in 21 and beyond. So until next time, let's continue to make it happen. No excuses. Let's go.